You ready for the Pentium III generation, 1999 plus?
Yes.
Or do you want to add something to the previous one?
No, I just wanted to check something because I wanted to check the prices. I always, when I'm trying to put things into perspective, I'm trying to understand what was the price upon release and what was the price later. So Pentium II on release,
They were quite expensive.
The cheapest part was $636.
Yeah.
In '97. The cheapest Pentium III upon release was $496. So this is more or less $200 less.
Yeah, like a third of the price less.
So this is one of those things that actually show that Intel had to create a product that would be for the lower market. And this was positioned so that you had Celeron, then you had the Pentium II, then you had Pentium III when it came to options you have at the same time.
Pentium III had two different options in terms of the physicality of it. So it was slot 1 and socket 370, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to have a chat about that one as well. And Pentium III was even more elaborate in terms of the amount of generations and products and a lot of different technologies that Intel brought to the table when they were designing it. So it was quite a big upgrade when compared to Pentium II as well. So additional SSE instructions happen here, 3D graphics acceleration, way higher clock speeds. We're going to definitely get to that. This is the first real CPU that went over gigahertz in one of the later revisions. A larger, faster L2 cache. As I mentioned, two different physical designs, slot and socket. They slowly started coming back to the socket-based design for a variety of reasons because they were able to actually start incorporating things back together as a result of the advancement of the technology and the process of producing the chips. Still x86 compatible, of course, just like every single one of them. And the first product that they introduced was Katmai Pentium III. I had that one as well. After that came Coppermine in 2000, then came Tualatin in 2001. And after that, we're entering the era of Pentium IV, our next topic of discussion.
But let me stop you at Katmai.
Yeah.
Let me stop you at Katmai because as this is going to be an episode where I'm looking at numbers and I'm talking about numbers. Katmai was just, you could call it a pre-release of the Pentium III.
Okay.
The reason why I'm calling it pre-release is because it, when compared to all the other versions, it had 9.5 million transistors. The Coppermine had 28 million. So it was immensely bigger.
The
technology was a big change because Katmai came to 600 megahertz. And then Coppermine was able to basically touch the gigahertz line and then go a little bit over it. So Pentium III 1133 was based on the Coppermine. The power requirements for the Katmai were around 30 to 34 watts, while the Coppermine in the fastest version was running at 33, and in its lowest version it was running at 15 or 17 watts. So basically, the part itself was much more, much less thermally intensive. It was heating a lot less. It was performing better, and it was a completely different architecture inside.
There was also one more super significant difference between those two. Coppermine was the first CPU in quite a while to include a huge speed bump on the FSB. This was the introduction of the EB processors that a lot of us hardware aficionados know and love because they switched to 133 megahertz FSB, which I would, if you line up, let's say 20 of our colleagues from those days, from the days when we were still doing the computer magazines and whatnot. And I had this discussion actually recently, a couple of weeks ago, with one of our colleagues who still works for a hardware company to this day. I'm guaranteeing you that any single list of the best Intel CPUs, let's say top 10 Intel CPUs, has to include at least one of the Coppermine CPUs. They were so good for the time when they were introduced. The speed jump and the amount of transistors, as you mentioned, were such a huge differentiator to the previous core, Katmai core. And those CPUs worked really well. And I had, again, because I was crazy, Pentium IIIs in the slot 1 versions were also dual socketable. I have one of those at home right now. It's my vintage PC. It's a crazy amount of innovation that was added to basically like a mid-season refresh in Intel's terms, yet it was a vastly different architecture, much more improved when compared to the Katmai core. And the first CPUs on the Coppermine started with, I think, 500 megahertz or something like that, and they ended up in the gigahertz region, which was, again, for the first time on the market, you had some CPUs which were actually crossing the gigahertz boundary, something that's both good and bad, as we're going to learn in some of the future processors, because
we are going to learn it right now.
But Pentium 4 is much more about that than Pentium 3.
I need to talk about a specific Pentium 3.
Okay.
1133.
Oh, hell yes.
The one that started Tom's Hardware, and the one that got Tom's Hardware financed, or so they say, because I must say that.
Don't be nasty.
Yes.
Allegedly,
yes. The thing is that Pentium 1133 is
1333, you think?
1133.
Oh yeah,
1133.
correct. I remember
1133 had distinction because at this time AMD was pushing the core speed, and the AMD was able to go over the 1.1 gigahertz by doing the exactly 1.1 gigahertz part. And Pentium 3 was stuck at exactly 1 gigahertz. So what they did is they decided they're going to be pushing for 1133 or 1.13 gigahertz part.
Just to be a little bit faster.
They needed to be a little bit faster.
Wasn't that product revoked from the market?
Yes, precisely. This is what I'm talking about. Because what they did is that they overclocked the processor that they had. It is mainly the same part that they had previously. It was launched at the same time in the June of 2001 as with the Pentium 3 800 and Pentium 1 gigahertz. And they tried to overclock it by playing with the multiplier. And voltage multiplier
Welcome to overclocking.
Yes, and what they did is that they were trying to sell it for $990 because they were supposed to be under $1,000. They put it on the market. And suddenly people realized that when they were trying to, of all things, compile the Linux kernel, the processor kept crashing. And they realized that the problem could be in the processor itself, not in the Linux kernel. And then Intel silently decided they're going to unrelease the processor. So they said, okay, we are not going to be selling this part anymore.
This sub 1,000 equaling 999 usually, or something like, or 990, is actually a reoccurring theme. It's going to happen for the next few generations for the highest end products, including the extreme editions and whatnot, those super important.
Yes, and the thing was that they suddenly got the urge to release the 12-Latin core, to completely redesign everything, and to design and try to beat the problems. The same thing, almost the same thing, happened with the Pentium 1333. But I think that the 1133 was the one that was much more rushed to the market, and this was one of those things when Intel realized that they are much more vulnerable than they are.
You just reminded me of something. If you remember those days, the way in which you were buying Intel CPUs was super confusing.
Yes.
Because you could have had something like, I don't know if I remember correctly, something like a let's say 800 megahertz CPU on 100 and on 133 megahertz FSB.
Yes.
It was so confusing to buy
On different
those.
cores.
Or different cores, different FSB speeds, basically different products altogether, still being rated at the same frequency, which back way then we translated to speed. Incorrectly so, but still.
The Coppermine T and the next core, the Toletin core, were on the market at the same time.
Yeah.
They were being released at the same time in June and July of 2001. So you could get different frontside bus. You could get different versions of the processor. You could get different sockets. You could get.
But they kind of went in the direction of the socket 370.
370. They gave up basically with the Coppermine T. They decided that this is going to be it, and they're going to just
go to socket-based system. Yeah.
Go to socket-based systems. I remember the 1333 had the problem also, but it wasn't. I think it wasn't released even
Publicly, yeah. I think so too.
I don't remember exactly, but I know that they had the problem, and after this problem, they
had a 1400 megahertz version of that as well. I don't know if it was released on the market, but I remember that it's there.
And this is where the things that we are talking about are
getting heated up.
No, getting heated up. This is where the collective internet suddenly loses its memory. You suddenly say, okay. The problem is that suddenly you don't remember or you misremember some stories because they were a huge thing back way when they happened, but nobody is interested in talking about them anymore.
Okay, it was 20 years ago, so it's kind of normal that people don't. Actually, to the point. Just wanted to add, when we are talking about the Pentium III generation, we went from 250 nanometers to 130.
Okay.
With Coppermine being 180, if I remember correctly. So the advancements in the actual technology for producing the CPUs was moving not full steam ahead. It was crazy. Because even if you compare the numbers, in a span of one CPU generation, Pentium III only, we went from 250 to 130, which is basically 50% smaller, just on the basis of a number. It works out a little bit differently, but it's still so. And the advancements of the Pentium III, MMX, SSE, SSE3, the speed that they brought over the gigahertz range and whatnot, and the 133 megahertz FSB for the EB models of Coppermine and for basically all of the Toletins was a precursor of things to come. And you correctly mentioned AMD because they were pushing the frequency spectrum as well, because this is the era at which the stage was set for what was about to become the frequency war, which happened there.
Let me interject there, because I'm always interjecting with different things. Let me introduce you to the concept of having a different processor for a laptop than the processor for the desktop. Let's call it mobile. Let's introduce you to the concept of mobile Pentium III or Pentium III-M.
I had it on my Dell laptop, the first laptop that I bought myself.
Then let me use the usual thing that Intel always did. Let me introduce you from mobile Pentium III to mobile Pentium III ULV, then LV. Then let me introduce you to the mobile Pentium III-M. Then let me introduce you to the mobile Pentium III-M ULV 933. This is the last part. The reason why I'm dealing with all this is because these were the actual products when Intel was trying to make a name for themselves when it came to laptops. The problem with laptops is that back in the day, the laptops were not that good.
Yeah.
The idea of having a laptop that will have a 16 or 17 or 19 hours of runtime was completely off the rails. What you could expect was 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe 4.
Not until Centrino came to market. The P3 laptops, P4 laptops were way less than that. Maybe 2 hours if you were lucky.
So what Intel had to do is they had to scale down the processor that was running at 33 watts to something under 10. So they were heavily trying. There is a mobile part. I'm not just looking at the numbers. As I said, I'm going to look at the numbers. 1 gigahertz mobile Pentium III is 34 watts. This is
At that point in time, you did not want to have that in a laptop.
Yes, so it's also $722.
Yeah, very cheap.
And then when they got rid of all the problems and they introduced the mobile Pentium III ULV 600, it was $200 and it was 9.7 watts. On the other hand, it was crap. Because it was slow. But the thing is that you could choose between a 1 gigahertz model that would be extremely expensive. It would waste your battery in every way possible. Or you could buy a 600 megahertz part that would be much slower, but it would be cheap enough.
Okay, I have a question for you.
And I also want to mention this because this was the time in another timeline that we're going to be mentioning in some other episode when Microsoft decided they really need to create a tablet.
Oh, yes.
And they wanted to stuff any of these parts in the tablet in order to make it work. And they decided the tablet is going to be huge. It needed to be self-sufficient. It needed to work for more than 2 hours. It needed to have a touchscreen. Touchscreens were only capacitive back then. So this was the time of changes.
Okay. Before my question, just to reiterate some of the most important things about the Pentium III generation. So introduction of new streaming extensions, larger caches, much greater speeds, a huge bump in terms of the amount of transistors on die from actually, let's say, revision A to B to C, if you look at it from that perspective, to all the way from Coppermine to Tualatin, whatever. But there is actually one more thing that was introduced in the Pentium III generation, which was very significant to this very day. So what is one very important hardware aspect of Pentium III that was introduced in Pentium III, which was a complete novelty for a CPU to have? Do you remember?
Xbox?
No. Who cares about the Xbox?
Okay, this was the response to the market, but the Xbox was based on the Coppermine Pentium III.
Yeah, I know. But what was a part of the Pentium III as a product, hardware product, like a piece of hardware that wasn't available in previous generations, apart from the SSC instructions, whatnot? There was one very important hardware unit that was in Pentium III.
I don't know what to think about. MMX probably. SSC.
No, that's
Okay.
we covered. No,
No?
a random number generator.
Okay. The thing that nobody uses, but it exists. Okay.
Yeah. It sort of became very important later, way later in the development of software and hardware and operating systems and whatnot.
Okay, but to be completely honest, when we are dealing with R&D generators, everybody is trying to create another one.
Yeah.
All the TPM chips try to create another one. All the chips try to create another one. Kernel is trying to use all the random number generators at its disposal to create yet another different random number generator.
Yeah,
because they are important for people. They're important for people because a good random number generator can make a difference between you getting hacked or not. But let's go back to the processors.
Yeah.
So,
are we done with Pentium IIIs because we need to do Pentium IVs and they are hugely fun?
No, I'm going to stop with the Xbox because I want to just mention that there was an Intel Pentium III KC733 Xbox CPU. There's 733 megahertz part that lost some of the cache, kept all the different numbers. And the idea was, it was created as a micro PGA2 packaging. So it was basically a grown-up CPU created as a mobile CPU in a small package that was directly on the die.
For a gaming console.
For a gaming console. And this was when Xbox was starting to appear. We are not going to talk about consoles right now. We're going to be talking about chips and consoles in some other episode, because there is a lot of fun to be had there.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to established players on the market like Nintendo, competing with non-so-established players on the market like Sony, and then Microsoft barging in and trying to create a console out of thin air.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so Pentium 4.
Yeah. You want to start or shall I?
Let's call it Pentium NetBurst.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the entire architecture change in its entirety.
Okay.
Basically, it was a redone of the architecture, and the thing was that it was introduced in 2000, but it overlapped with the Pentium III.
That was one of the reasons why people didn't necessarily switch to Pentium 4 all that quickly. And the reason for that is actually performance.
The reason for that was actually performance, and the other thing is that I think that was the same reason why, when we were talking about Pentium Pro, sorry, I think that the reason was because Intel was ramping up the production, and they were just making sure that they have a viable part in the market before they're able to push the numbers up. And at the same time, since the production time of a chip is something that makes the chip smaller, cheaper, and also ramps up your profit.
Okay.
Because every unit that you produce is, after a certain number of units, is basically a net gain for you. You're going to lose a lot of money in the start, but if you are able to keep up your production, you're going to be able to create cheaper and cheaper chips. And if you're keeping the same price, you are gaining money. So Pentium 3 made sense, made sense to get the Pentium 3 on the market at the same time as Pentium 4, and then ramp up the Pentium 4 slowly.
I had Pentium 3 and Pentium 4 desktop at the time, and I had Pentium 3 and Pentium 4 laptops at the same time.
I'm sorry.
Yes, me too. Because the first iteration, the Willamette Pentium 4, was just a POS.
It was a novelty.
Now, it was a POS, and rightfully so, because basically all of the Pentium 3s at the same speed were either equally as fast or faster, while usually using less energy to actually kind of be completely stupid and say that out loud as well. But the fundamental thing that Intel did with Pentium 4, they went for different design direction, slowly but surely, which came to bite them very, very soon afterwards as well. What they wanted to do is they wanted to introduce a CPU that is going to have way longer pipeline and way higher clock speed. That's the basis of the comment that I made a little bit earlier in the episode. Both of these technological, let's say, precursors to higher frequency and higher performance required a lot of different things to be set correctly, because you just cannot use the old software on top of the new CPU that was designed that way and expect that to be so much faster, because that just doesn't happen. Hence the reason why they made another significant change in the CPU design and introduced the concept that we nowadays know as hyperthreading. Because the pipeline was too long, and they tried to use the length of the pipeline in a programmable fashion by dividing it. I'm overly simplifying it because it's a hugely complicated topic. Basically separating the pipeline into two so that you have multiple entries into the pipeline to feed the instruction, the data, and whatever it needs to be done. Up to this day, we have the hyperthreading. Some of the next generation CPUs I heard are going to get rid of that. But realistically speaking, when you look at the performance of the CPU with hyperthreading, unless we're talking about something that's heavily serialized or maybe even better, multimedia type of instructions, it did not necessarily offer any kind of performance boost in real life, and is still being debated amongst people, even in the science let's say, in the science region, whether or not it was a worthwhile investment of our time. But the fundamental reason why it was introduced was the length of the pipeline. Now, if you know some of the basics of, let's say, computer architecture and CPU design, you know that a longer pipeline usually means that you can develop higher speeds, so better clocks. It also means that you could have increased instruction throughput, let's call it that way. That means that you can have, let's say, a CPU that is performing faster, but there's a lot of criteria that needs to be met for that to actually happen. And a lot of the things that we had on the market at that particular point in time, for example, length of the instructions that were present in the Intel CPU, in CPUs, versus the length of the pipeline, that's a fun discussion to be had, and we can have it in some other episode that's related to CISC and CPU design. Don't want to get into that, but it's a crazy story when you look at it from that perspective. It also led to a huge increase in something else, which is the power dissipation. So the way in which these Pentium IVs were done, there were some that were really excellent. Most of them were really not all that good. Although I really liked the idea of moving forward with, the new processor, new generation, larger cache, SSC2, larger L2 cache actually. The new socket was introduced, 478, if you ask me, one of the most important sockets in Intel history, even to this day. And the appearance of the first Pentium IV, again, Willamette core, I think that should be forgotten and buried. But the introduction of the next core in 2002, which was the Northwood core, that's completely different. That's the opposite direction. One of the best things that Intel did within the realms of limitations that they had at that particular point in time. Very big microarchitecture improvements, better manufacturing process technology helped definitely. Translation, smaller transistor size. They went to way higher clock speeds, larger and faster layer to memory. SSC-free instruction set was added, hyperthreading from the get-go. This was initially the 130 nanometer processor node.
Sorry, just the Northwood didn't have the hyperthreading.
Oh yes, it did.
In the first run.
No, I know. With the later CPUs, they did.
But the thing that it did had, because I have to slow you down a bit.
Okay.
What it had was the first one across the 3 gigahertz line.
But yet nobody wanted to buy the 3 gigahertz version because it was way too hot. Do you remember which was the most significant and by far the most popular processor of that generation? Very easy. Everybody knows that.
I would call it a Prescott.
No. Which frequency? No. We're still talking about Northwood. And I'm not being sarcastic. Which was by far the most popular CPU of that generation, of the Northwood generation?
2.4?
2.4.
Okay.
Because it offered excellent relationship between the price, performance, and the crazy amount of heat that was about to come very soon after that. The 3.0 was, I had 3.0 in one of my computers, but I actually exchanged it back to 2.4 because at that point in time, you will remember this, the cooling technology was not as advanced as it is today. Let's call it that way.
The cooling was the problem because when you take a look at the TDP, you can see that
90 watts?
Buying 80.
Yeah.
But the Pentium IV 2.4 was something like 57 to 59.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the Pentium 2.2 and 2.4 had the same cost. The price was exactly the same. So it didn't make any sense to buy anything slower than this. And
there was a 2.8 version, if I remember correctly, as well.
There's a 2.5, 2.6, 2.8, and so on. But the thing was that I think this was the result of the binning. When you take a look at the numbers, this is probably the same processor, more or less the same processor, but with different binnings. Pentium IV 3.0 was 80 watts, and then what Intel did is that they said, okay, let's go back to 2.26, 2.4B, 2.53, 2.66, 2.8, and so on. So they didn't go over 3 gigahertz because they realized that this is going to be a problem.
The binning was a problem, the power was the problem, the cooling was the problem, everything. Stability of the system was actually brought into the equation all of a sudden, after many, many years of that being a non-topic at all. Actually, there's a crazy story that I need to tell you from that era. There was a Prescott version of the one of the next generations of P4. We're going to discuss this, but I want to still tell this story as a precursor to kind of illustrate the madness. The Prescott version of Extreme Edition. I don't know if it was 3.63 or 383, something like that, gigahertz. In one of the environments that I used for testing at home, I got the most expensive motherboard on the market at that particular point in time, which was 8-bit ICE, the Max Free version by ICS 7 or something like that. The Prescott with the CPU that it came with, and this came straight from Intel, actually, the CPUs and the coolers, the built-in ones, with that came with the CPU as a package, like a box version of the CPU. It melted the socket on the i7 Max 3 motherboard, basically like a pancake theorem. The motherboard was raised on, let's say, a couple of stands, and the CPU just fell with the socket and with the cooler through the motherboard. That's what happened to me with one of the Extreme Editions. Hence my utter disdain for what's about to come after the Northwood Core, which is basically the appearance of some of the Prescotts and then Pentium D, because they kept the same. I hesitate to call them design specifications because they were just crazy, completely crazy, and in less than a lockstep with what the cooling technology can do. And we are talking about the era at which Zalman's CNPSs appeared, 7700, 9900, some of the most famous CPUs of all time, CPU coolers of all time.
But to introduce much more complexity into all of this, we need to make sure that people understand that Prescott was the name for two different series of processors.
Yeah.
One was the regular
new socket, 775.
New socket and everything new, 478.
The first ones, later 775.
Then 775 LGA. But the thing was that one was without hyperthreading.
Yeah.
And one was with hyperthreading.
Correct.
The one you are referring to was without hyperthreading.
Yeah. 130 watts TDP? Something like that?
With hyperthreading, something 115, I think.
Yeah, it was something insane for the time period. I mean, we're not talking about it from today's perspective, of course.
Because Prescott was one, and then hyperthreading was introduced in Northwood, and then in Prescott, and then it went completely off the rails. And the reason why I want to mention this is that when it came to Prescott, the last generation, you were talking about 115 Pentium IV hyperthreading.
Extreme Edition version of the CPU, actually.
Do you remember the model that is called Pentium IV HT 580?
I vaguely remember that Intel started reintroducing the numbering into the product names. Pentium D was the next one with that.
So
I had
Pentium
D 820. I remember.
Now
that.
let's talk about something else. Let's talk about you working in a magazine, IT magazine.
Just like you, yes.
Yes, and let's imagine that you got from through the regular channels, you get the new Pentium that you're going to test.
Okay.
It is going to be called either Pentium 4 HT 580, or it's going to be called Pentium 4 HT 4.0.
Okay.
This is the name. You get the processor. You start to run it. You see that it is completely insane because the TDP is insane.
Yeah, you could
the processor
bake
is running. The processor is insane. It's completely insane. It's not stable. You cannot get the motherboard to run. You cannot get the processor to boot all the time. It sometimes boots. It sometimes doesn't boot. You get, or the magazine gets, orders for all the advertisements and everything else. They have pre-prepared new campaign. There was even talking that you are going to get invited to a special launch party because this is going to be the first Intel Pentium 4 gigahertz part that everybody is going to see. And then suddenly, 10 days before the release, they say, okay, can you just kindly give us the processors back? Mm-hmm. Because this is the only processor that has the canceled with it, because it existed. Everybody saw it. Everybody saw what the problem was. And then Intel, not so quietly, just simply pulled it off the market.
Which core are you talking about? Is it written?
It's Prescott.
Okay, because there were two more CPUs after that were cancelled as well.
It was Prescott. It was Prescott 2 and Prescott 2M.
Okay.
Depending on which one you are talking about, it is the same core. And the thing that they had the problem with is that they were pushing the multiplier too far. They were pushing the multiplier too far because they were trying to
out AMD.
No, I don't think that this is the out AMD. I think that the thing was that they were trying to just push it to the 4 gigahertz line because it was something that nobody else could do. So they decided Intel is going to be the one to do it. And the way they tried to do it was bad.
Yeah. Just pump up the heat, add additional, add additional multipliers, add more power to the system, add more amperage. Basically, that was one of the reasons why. Produce enormous amount of heat, and let's hope, and pray that it's going to work. Which
and
I
think this is where the wave broke. I think this is where Intel realized that trying to say the Moore's law says that you need to double the speed and not double the number of transistors is not going to work anymore. They're going to change something because they have hit the wall. The wall was the gigahertz number, and the reason they hit it is because of the speed of light.
I would say that the aspect that you are talking about came way later, but you're correct in saying that they went the wrong way about it. Because Moore's law, if you were actually looking into the let's say our mathematics of it, kind of still stuck for quite a few more years in a way, not in a way of using single core, and it wasn't as linear as it used to be. Nowadays we cannot talk about it because it's basically gone in practical terms. And there's a reason for that.
I would say it hasn't gone, but the problem is that the Moore's law is whatever marketing says it is. And the problem is that when you're talking about Moore's law, you're talking about something, whatever, is going to double every something years. And when something is transistors, cores, CPU speed, front side bus speed, memory speed, whatever number you throw at it, this is going to stick for a while and then it's going to fail. If you think about Moore's law, the way it was intended originally to be, and the idea was that the performance of the computer is going to double every 2 years. This can still make sense.
Yes.
But you need to take into consideration what performance is and what the Moore actually meant by it. He just said that we are going to be just exponentially be creating new, much better computers every 2 years.
To your point of cancelled CPUs, there were two that were cancelled after that one. Do you remember those?
No.
Texas and Jayhawk.
Okay, but they weren't so spectacular.
No, those were the most spectacular.
No, but this
ever.
one was spectacular because they had the.
Yeah, you had the physical part. Please bring it back.
No, but I didn't only have the physical part. I had the flags. I had the all the merchandise, everything, the goodies, everything.
Same, I remember.
And they just said, "Okay, can we get it back? We're going to pay you lunch. Can we get it back?"
Yeah, I remember that day very well.
The guy from Slovenia, we're not going to mention him.
Actually, very, very cool set of dudes.
Yes, and they had to go through from one magazine to another magazine and simply just call for everything back.
I wouldn't be want to be in their shoes those days.
But I know that our marketing in the magazine was so happy because in order to make up for the inconvenience that they caused, because they did cause an inconvenience.
Oh, sure they did.
I think they ordered something like 2 times the number of advertisements they usually did.
You know what? Let me have a snarky comeback to that.
Yes?
I couldn't care less.
Me neither.
No,
me neither. I'm always amused when people from PR
and marketing,
especially PR in this particular case, need to just pay for the mistakes.
Oh, I like it very much.
This is the reason.
Excellent.
I don't care about the ads.
Yeah.
I cared about simply saying, okay, we are just now, without any other reason, just to be nice, we are going to be just paying another set of ads.
I was just like you, so we were both working at the computer magazines at that point in time. My way of thinking about all of that I was extremely at the other end of the scale of not caring about the ads. My impulse was, I'm going to write 50 pages of the magazine every single month. If an advertiser doesn't like it, well, so be it. And I would say that 99% of that attitude was completely backed by the magazine that I was working for. There was just one instance in which we got into a huge fight, which was completely irrelevant because at the end of that fight, I got my way. They still don't know how, but I know how. That being said, it was always something that at least marketing and PR people kept at the back of their minds. Don't piss off your advertisers, blah, blah, blah. Not that I cared all that much. I did what we were supposed to do. I wrote pieces that were in line with the truth, and if the advertiser didn't like that, I didn't care. The only exception was if the product did not work. And I think that's
that's also what we did. If the product was dead in water as we got it, we just gave it back and not talk about it.
This doesn't work, please send us the new...
if you have a version that works, send us.
If not...
If not, okay, we are going to understand this is not working and that's it.
Because that was the moral thing to do.
And this was the normal thing to do, not only moral, because in the magazine, when you are testing something, you get something like 250 to 300 different devices per magazine, per month.
Issue, yeah.
Per issue. We were doing, at the same time, we were also doing the magazine that was covering the mobile phones. So imagine having another set of 200 devices for that magazine. So 500 devices sitting on the shelves, waiting to be tested. Mm-hmm. If something is not working, you are not going to push it because you don't have any reason to. You just say, okay, please just send me something that works. If it doesn't work, okay, no harm done. Let's go different ways. So that's it.
Okay.
Now let me just quickly, while ChatGPT is generating things, let me just quickly talk about Pentium IV Extreme Editions. And because
if I can just say one thing about them, there are many of those. The Pentium IV generation of those, Pentium IV, Pentium D generations of those, were and still are the bane of my existence.
Yes.
Everything else after that, and there were quite a few extreme editions afterwards in the core generations. And I still have some of them in my drawer at home, and most of them actually work to this very day. That's a completely different story. But those couple of generations of Northwood Prescott Pentium D Extreme Editions, they should not exist. They are the insult to human intelligence. That's what they are.
I think you are being too harsh. I think they're just a simple money grab.
But nobody bought them.
Yes, but they were a paper-released money grab. They did the same thing as they did with the Celeron. They had to create a part that's going to be extremely expensive. Celeron was extremely cheap. Extreme Edition was extremely expensive. Mm-hmm. It was more or less unobtainable.
Yeah, unobtainium.
Yes, and they just created an idea of we are going to be having a processor that is going to be so expensive that you are not going to be able to afford it. So for a low price of, I don't know, $300 or $400, you can buy not as good of a processor, but much cheaper one.
This was on the other side, though.
Yes, basically a cheap version of Ferrari.
Yeah. So Ferrari Dino.
Okay, whatever.
They were the Ferrari Dinos of the CPU.
No, they weren't. But the rest was the Ferrari Dino.
Top Gear fans will understand this metaphor.
Anyways, so the Pentium IV Extreme Edition was the first time when I realized that the Intel is going to try to push for something called Extreme Edition.
Okay.
It is called i9 now, but i9 is light years ahead of what Extreme Editions were.
You cannot compare those two things.
Because i9s A exist,
B work, C work permanently, and
yes.
D are top-notch processors, whatever you may think about them, or however you want to compare them.
But if you take a look at the prices for the Extreme Editions, none of them is priced less than $999.
As I was saying earlier, yeah.
Just a money grab.
No, so 4960, 5960... all of those CPUs, 3960 if I remember correctly as well. I have some of those still, and they're operational to their credit 20 years later, or maybe a little bit less, 15 years later. One of the computers in the office, the silver one, in the Cosmos case, that's a 3930. Still works to this very day on one of the best motherboards ever made on Gigabyte, which we used as a metaphor in one of our previous episodes, by the way. Yeah.
Okay. So, have we finished with the Pentium IVs?
Do we need to have a spitting session on Prescott furthermore, or are we done with that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Okay.
because Prescott, in all its releases and mid-releases and half releases and cancellations and everything else, is a pretty complex thing.
Okay.
It's just, I think that there. Let me do a quick tangent about it. When people are talking about marketing,
Okay.
inevitably the talks comes to mentioning Coca-Cola and the change of the taste of the Coca-Cola and how it cost them so much money and so on and so on and so on.
Okay.
Prescott was one of those things. Prescott was a
the extreme, but
processor that started it, that was pretty much okay, but for a few different reasons, Intel kept pushing it until it couldn't be pushed, and then pushed yet again. They were just trying to buy time for the next generation of the processors, and by buying time, I mean putting anything that could or couldn't run,
Throw it at the wall.
put it on the market, and then just hope that somebody is going to buy the next generation of the processor. Next generation being the same processor, but having a slightly increased speed. So 3.06 gigahertz, 3.1 gigahertz, 3.2 gigahertz, 3.3 gigahertz, and so on and so on and so on. So simply just trying to push the faster parts to the market, making it cheaper, and hoping that somebody is going to buy them.
Okay.
And then the crowning achievement of the whole line was the Pentium D.
Yes. Thank you for agreeing with me on something.
Let's talk about Pentium D.
Actually, one other thing happened when Intel switched from the early Pentium 4s to the Pentium D, which was the introduction of 64-bit compatibility. We shouldn't forget about that. So that's just mentioning it. We're not going to go over that. Just mentioning that this was the era at which that happened. So the Pentium D, if you ask me, the top of the line stupid processors of all time are that list is headed by Pentium D, followed by Prescott, and then we can discuss everything else. I was stupid enough to actually buy one of those in my computer, and it just didn't work properly. It was first Intel's attempt to do a dual-core CPU by basically sticking two Prescotts on the same die, connect them via some kind of a, let's say, interconnect in between them, and present that as a dual-core architecture. AMD was already, I think, going towards more of an integrated dual-core CPU, which was a real dual-core, not something that included these sorts of compromised designs. So two cores basically glued together to work in some very strange way, which was not a good way, by the way. Hyper-threading, 64-bit support, still LGA 775 socket. This was the time when that became the de facto standard. If I remember correctly, there were two cores, Pressler and, what was it, Smithfield, or something like that. I don't know which one was worse. So Pentium 4, Pentium D 8 or 9 series, whatever. I had 820 and I think 920, if I remember correctly. They were just so abysmally bad in terms of the performance and everything that they did. Although I could give them credit today, many years afterwards, because of the fact that they were dual core and the market was not necessarily ready for that. Let's put that on the table. Operating systems of the era were not necessarily dual core ready. Just like today, we have problems with many core CPUs and the Windows and Linux having huge issues with, I think, 64 core plus types of CPUs.
I think that the thing that Intel did is that they had to quickly switch to dual core systems.
Yeah, AMD was pushing that
because the main reason was,
my bad. AMD was pushing, but that was not the primary reason. The primary reason was the failure of the net burst architecture before that, because they reached the ceiling and they wanted to go in a different direction.
And at the same time, what happened is that AMD launched at Athlon.
Yeah.
Athlon X2 was the first actual multi-core. And
No, actually, it was launched a couple of days after the Intel Pentium D, but that's a different topic.
yes, but the actual multi-core was available before. Pentium D was, as we said, a quick job of slapping two cores together and trying to launch it before AMD.
Over a pint of beer.
And I would guess that it was over. It was a meeting that when somebody actually realized that AMD is going to launch a real multi-core processor, that they need something to be able to launch before the AMD. So it's just a marketing thing, and because AMD Athlon wasn't as good as any of the Pentium 4s.
Until the next generation, yes.
Until the next generation, but Athlon X64, so the generation that launched the dual core, showed the market that the single core processors are a history.
Yeah, they're going to go away.
And this is something that was scary for the Intel, because they realized that they don't have a viable product right now. They need to do something. This something needs to be done immediately, because the Pentium D was launched in, what was it, 2003?
2004?
2003, 2004, let me check.
Maybe.
Pentium D,
I think 4.
2005.
5, yeah, correct.
And
Sorry, my bad.
first real two-core processor was launched in 2006. So they had to buy time before they were able to launch multi-core processors.
A native multi-core,
and
let's call it.
AMD already had those on the market. And this is a big deal. When you are dealing with AMD has a nasty ability to suddenly come to the market with a completely new solution that actually makes sense. They have shown it a few times, and Intel is always surprised when it happens. The last time when this happened was when the last generation of the generation of the help me the last
Zen?
the Zen architecture came to the market, because their architecture was better than what Intel had in the market.
Still is.
Okay, you can argue that nowadays, when we're talking about 13 and 14 generation of Intel, they are in par when it comes to performance.
Not in terms of design, though.
But the design of the last generations of Intel and last generations of AMD are completely different.
Yes, they are. They are going to come together in the next one, but still. They are still vastly different, yeah. For me, actually, this the appearance of Pentium D marked the first time that I ever considered actually having an AMD system, and I did. I switched to Thunderbird Athlon, which was the representation of basically the first generation of that, and after that, I also had basically something that a lot of people have, the Barton 2500 XP or something like that. Basically, everybody had that. On the, do you remember those NF7 motherboards, NF7S, Abit motherboards? They're super popular for those Bartons. This coincides also with huge performance of the aforementioned CPU coolers by Zalman, and they were not necessarily compatible with the slot that AMD was using, but you could just 180 turn them and you could still stick them on the motherboard and they fit. I remember those days very well because I assembled a couple of dozens of these systems when I was still working at a computer magazine. But this was my first real introduction to AMD, even though I had them on the desk every single freaking day. After that, a lot of the next, I don't know how many generations of AMD were never piquing my interest on the desktop. Opterons are different.
We are going to be talking about
AMDs
in the different episode, because we are going to cut this one.
No, we're going to finish this up and then divide it in half.
We are going to cut this one short, because short means 2 hours. What I'm trying to say is that the NetBurst was the generation that was what Intel had running at the moment.
Yeah.
They were too slow in investing in the next generation of the CPUs. So they hit a snag. The snag was the inability to cool the processor, because of the architecture being designed in such a way that the cooling was impossible. So this was the reason why they weren't able to do the 4 GHz part. This also meant that they weren't able to do anything when it came to speeding up the processor anymore. And since the design for the chip didn't include any way of CPU talking to another core of the CPU, they didn't have an internal bus to be able to do this. This was what created the biggest problem for them. They had to create different things. They had to create different cores. They had to glue them together to make things work. So Pentium D was just a botch job. It was just something that was done quickly in order to be able to create
A room to create something that's actually dual core, that's kind of coming a
because
little bit later.
it is when you're in the stock market, it looks bad if your main competitor is able to
Do something that you cannot do.
basically run circles around you and saying, okay, we are not going to go, because when AMD was created the dual core processor, they were also promising they're going to be switching to 4 cores. Okay, this is the same AMD that had to switch to 3-core processors in one iteration.
I remember.
For the same reasons that Intel had to do with the Pentium D.
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of the CPUs and the technology at the time did not necessarily allow all of the things that they wanted to do, and that's the reality of it as well.
Just to finish this, because I want to get the thing out, is that I think that the AMD's idea of the 3-core processor wasn't a bad one.
Me neither.
Because it made possible creation of a processor that's going to be basically scalable. They were creating the 4-core processor and then binning it as 4, 3, or 2 cores. And also the operating systems, as you said, weren't ready for the multi-core processing. Some of the applications are not ready even yet.
You mean most?
Some of the applications, but I would guess that the majority of the applications that are able to do multi-core processing are able to do it, and they're doing it right now.
Oh, I hell disagree, but okay.
In the 2000s, none of them were able to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So Pentium D, the bane of our existence, the precursor to Intel finally getting their senses together in a sense, realizing that this cannot go on. They obviously realized that earlier, because this was just a product to fill in a little bit of time, to buy themselves time for the thing that was coming. And the thing that was coming was the core generation of the CPUs, which was, let's say, loosely based on the mobile CPUs much more than anything they've done in the past. And I have very vivid memories of a lot of discussions with Intel people at various forums and fairs and online and via email about the things that they are going to do, whatnot. And I also remember the huge amount of noise that all of us made as journalists at that point in time, constantly yelling at them, come on, stop doing this. BS, Tejas and Jayhawk actually proved that very eloquently. We didn't need to use any more words. And around the corner, there was the first generation / iteration of the core CPUs, which changed everything. And for the most part, up till last year, that was the branding that Intel used as well. Now they're switching again to something new. But that being said, the implications of the way in which they redesigned their CPUs so that they can do the things that they can do today, although there were quite a few mishaps on the way, in technology especially, past 6 or 7 years have marked probably the biggest, let's say, amount of time in Intel's history where they were unable to move forward with the processing technology of their CPUs. But all of that significantly changed in the past 2 generations. Intel is definitely catching up. And at the end of the day, we're going to see in some of the next generations of the CPUs, they are coming, I think, at the end of this year or next year, from what I read in some of the articles, they are going to be significantly different. And both Intel and AMD are moving towards what M chips design are doing, which is basically the CPU and GPU integrated with memory on the same die. This is the correct solution to the problem that we've had for the past whatever amount of decades you want to throw your stick at, as the memory latency and the way in which memory is so far away from the CPU has the biggest influence on the way in which the applications perform and to the quality of service that's underpinning that in the enterprise.
Okay. On that, we are going to finish this second part of the episode that started as the one episode.
Yes.
And be seeing you next week when hopefully I'm going to be talking about 602 once again. And then switching over to Alpha, because I have some things and some footage to show you in order to clean up the office, because this guy here tries to get me to clean the office up and remove the old Alpha NT that is based there right now.
Yeah, it has been there for 4 months now or something.
Yes, but there is no need to remind a man every 6 months.
Yeah, I know. But creativity demands time and space when we are men.
When we are ready, we are ready.
Yeah, you just need to look at the calendar.
Yes. Or the thousand.
Yeah, or maybe a whole year calendar at times.
Yes. Okay. So, anyways, thank you for being with us. See you next time, and bye.
Bye.